Welcome to our channel, ladies and gentlemen. Something is happening at the international front, and the international media is reporting about it because William Ruto has really been embarrassed and exposed by the very developed countries that he thought were his friends. We all understand by now, it is in the public domain, that when William Ruto ascended to power, he was aided by countries like the USA, the European Union, and the United Kingdom. And ever since William Ruto took oath of office, he has received many delegations from those countries. He has hosted Bill Gates, he has hosted King Charles, he has hosted Jill Biden, the current First Lady of the United States of America, and of course he has hosted many other European trade delegations. And William Ruto has visited UK, US, and many European countries, including recently when he was invited to give a keynote speech at the European Union Parliament, where they gave him a standing ovation.
In the face of threats that transcend borders and oceans, it is essential to adopt a clear-sighted and unified approach to confront climate change, combat poverty, and tackle conflict. Madam President, Madam President, honorable members, the annals of history are replete with instances where collective action has achieved what no single nation could accomplish alone. We are acutely aware that our decisions and actions will significantly shape the 21st century. Years from now, future generations will reflect on this era, scrutinizing the choices we make in this moment. Let it be said that we were visionary, not just preoccupied with the present, but deeply invested in the future. Let our legacy be one of foresight, collaboration, and solidarity. Let us be guided by a deep commitment to ensuring a prosperous, equitable, and sustainable world for those who will follow our footsteps. I thank you.
But when all this was happening, something very key was also happening behind the curtains. Apparently, the African Union Commission, among other countries, have been complaining that they are getting unfair representation at the global level when it comes to global taxation, because the countries that determine and set policies on how taxes are being shared in intra-country trade, and whenever big companies establish, their offices in your country, how do you share revenue? At the global level, how much interest are you supposed to be charged when you take loan from institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, International Monetary Fund? And this debate has gone on and on. So recently, Africa has been at the forefront championing for fair representation. There is an organization here called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, that has been setting policies when it comes to matters tax, the global tax revenue. This organization is an organization of 38 wealthy countries, nations like the United States of America, UK, and most of these European Union countries. And they have held so tight that role that they don't want it to be removed from them. So Nigeria has got, I think, is the only country that has got a permanent representation at the United Nations Convention. They had tabled on behalf of Africa a fair representation, and they had tabled that this role should be removed from the Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and it should be given to the UN, because now UN is a representation of the nations globally. Now, when they presented this, it was to be debated and a vote was to be taken. Prior to the vote, William Ruto had been invited to the European Union Parliament, and he gave a keynote speech there, thanking them. And so many would think that they were going to support Africa's bid to get fair representation, because in that OECD there isn't any African country that is represented, and that is why, because it was formed in, I think, some 2 centuries or some years back. So Africa wanted an institution that includes other African countries. What shocked many, ladies and gentlemen, and I want us to read this. This is a story from the Reuters. It's being reported by international media that UN votes to create a historic global tax convention despite European Union and UK moves to kill the proposal. That when Africa tabled this proposal that would ensure that we have a fair representation at the global level, to remove this role from them, there was a last-minute attempt to kill this. Just look at what happened. They say the United Nations General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly for the organization to develop a global tax framework, despite last-minute attempts to derail the plan from wealthy countries including the United Kingdom, United States, and the entire European Union bloc. Ladies and gentlemen, look at that. USA, UK, and the EU. And these are the countries, the nations that had aided William Ruto's victory. And they have always pretended that they're Ruto's friend. In what advocates hailed as a historic victory, countries voted 125 to 48 to adopt a resolution tabled by Nigeria last month on behalf of African member states, calling for a UN tax convention that could drastically change how global tax rules are set. Europe has got about 28 countries. The entire European countries contributed to the 48 that voted against this move. And the 48 countries included the USA. Joe Biden, who has always presented himself as someone who is really concerned about the affairs of Africa, affairs of Kenya, Ruto's friend, European Union, and the UK. And this happened after William Ruto had just given a keynote speech. It happened after just a few weeks or months after King Charles had visited Kenya. And they embarrassed Africa. They embarrassed William Samoei Ruto. Africa is very lucky that this resolution was adopted by 125 countries that were tired of this dominance by a few wealthy nations that have always connived in some backroom and closed-door clandestine meetings to develop policies that will be injurious to Africa, ladies and gentlemen. And the reason why this is very interesting is the way our president, the Kenyan president, and of course many other presidents who continue to visit, these European nations, thinking that they are our friends. And we have made a lot of noise concerning this. When we do this, many people think that we are against President Ruto. But now it has come out very clearly. What are the lessons that William Ruto must learn now that they presented a good proposal that will be good for Africa, and his friends, people like Joe Biden, refused? Because hapa ndio tulikuwa tunasema mbivu na mbichi yalikuwa yanajulikana. It was the moment of truth to understand whether these are our real friends. In the words of the former president of the USA, when Osama bin Laden orchestrated a plan and bombed the World Trade Center in the US, George Bush said that in times like this, we know who are our friends and who are our enemies. This was the moment of truth for William Ruto, the moment of truth for Africa, to know our friends who are really concerned about our affairs, global trade affairs, fairness in terms of interest on loans, fairness in terms of taxation, and we saw our friends. William Ruto must understand that the USA, EU, and UK are not our friends at all. And now it is true that they have been using us for their own selfish gains. They have been using William Samoei Ruto. And if our president was blind, this is the time to open his eyes. If he has been like the proverbial ostrich, if he has been casting his head in the sand, this is the time to remove his head from the sand and understand that Africa must rise up together, must rise up against the machination of the West. Number two, William Ruto must now rethink the Haiti deal, where he was leading, he was at the forefront of leading other nations to go to Haiti ostensibly to create peace, because it is now crystal clear that everything around USA is shrouded on mischief, because they just want to do this for their own self-aggrandizement. And William Ruto must not move with speed the way he has been doing, because he's being used and he will be left alone. I expected that these people will think of Ruto, will think of the other presidents, and will vote in favor of Africa, in favor of Kenya. They have been coming here to give, exceptional, speeches, exemplary speeches, just how much they love Africa and the cooperation. Now, at the time when we needed them, they left us. This Haiti thing must stop. It has also come very clearly that William Ruto is very gullible, being invited to give keynote speeches, being identified at the UN summit. I remember one day when Joe Biden selected him among the other presidents and saying that his lead to present 1,000 policemen to Haiti is a good thing, and that the UN had to resolve very fast because an African president had decided to lead this team. This has shown that he's very gullible. He can easily be cheated. We have always known William Ruto as someone who has cheated very many people, deceived them. But now we found out that he's also very gullible. The culmination of our statement must now come true. I know we have always said that he has accepted GMO, he has accepted things like LGBTQ, he has removed subsidies courtesy of the World Bank and the IMF. But now this one is a clear indication, because this vote was done and everyone knows. You go to the archives, it has been reported by Al Jazeera, CNN, Reuters, BBC, that This group voted, in fact, not just voting against it, but last minute attempts to thwart this idea. And I understand that there are fears that as it's being discussed, there are, attempts by these wealthy nations to ensure that they thwart this process, because they want the authority to determine tax policies to remain in the hands of a few countries, a few wealthy countries, who will be determining what is happening in the world. The same way they have determined our presidents in Africa, the same way they come in a very clandestine way to take our resources, the same way they want to control us, the same way they describe Africa as a dark continent. What they want the world to know is that Africa is full of conflicts, corruption, yet they are the pillars of corruption. They are the pillars of violence in Africa. And this has really exposed them. I don't know whether we will still have a few people trying to defend Europe, to defend USA, to defend UK. Next time we see them sending trade delegations to Africa and to Kenya specifically, we must ask them why they are deceiving us that they are our friends. Yet, when it comes to financial autonomy, when it comes to making plans and policies that will help us develop, they refuse, and they still want to call us third world countries. Ladies and gentlemen, let this be an eye-opener, because this is just the beginning of the battle. They are not going to give up easily. But as for William Ruto, he's been embarrassed. He has been exposed because his friends, whom he has been advocating for, left Africa, abandoned Kenya at the hour of need. And I dare say these are not our friends.